What'd you do, Becca?
I didn't do it.
We're in trouble. Is this okay likewise? Do we need it darker for your
I think, yeah, you guys can be the judge as you start to look at the images. I'm just lowering the volume on my prehistoric phone. I actually have a telephone. That's it. Telephone.
That's great.
I'm old school.
Two talks for one. That will be awesome, right? Tonight, I've been trying to get this guy here since I moved down here almost 6 years ago. Because his fame transcends the Red River and goes to parts wide and expansive all over the country. And and I just found out this week when I was doing a little bit of research on him, he has a barbecue blog.
Actually, I don't have it. Somebody else does.
But you're on it.
I don't know nothing about no blog.
Right. But your name is associated with the barbecue. So probably you would be a good person to ask about where's a good place to eat around here. Right?
Sure.
Anyway, Rufus has got he teaches at Kilgore College, Kilgore Community College, about 2 hours from here. And what I'm kind of interested in is that he's got several books. So he works like these projects. He's got a book on the Kilgore Rangerettes, those girls, right? And one on a little town called Weeping Mary, which is a really interesting book, which I have and forgot to bring tonight to have you sign it. So I'll have to meet you again.
I'll fax you.
Okay, that'll be good. And anyway, I will shut up, but let's please welcome Rufus Lovett, and that's it.
Oh, please. Please. So I went to school here back in 1970-something. I guess I finished up around 76. So I was here in 75, 76, basically, doing graduate work. Back then, the photography department was in the School of Journalism. So I studied under Jack Bell, Otha Spencer, Nolan Bailey. I don't know if you've heard those names. But Nolan was the main photography professor or instructor who was from Brooks Institute. And he was this former Air Force pilot guy that was crazy and showed you very little compassion. Right? You knew him.
I knew him.
Chad knew him. And
up the road here.
Huh?
He just lives up the road.
He moved back to Commerce?
He lives in Greenville.
You're kidding me. Oh, in Greenville.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I had to tell you this little story about Nolan because we were in a class and he was really harsh in his print discussions. And I don't know if you guys probably don't dry mount prints anymore, but we used to have to dry mount prints a certain way. There were rules when you were in Nolan's class. There are rules in my class too. The number one rule is there are no rules. Okay? But in Nolan's class, there were rules. And he would take the mat board with your dry mounted print, and he would kind of bend it a little bit. And if it just popped off just a little bit in the corner, he would take it and peel it the rest of the way off and tear the print and toss it back at you, literally toss it back at you in class. He would take a print, and if it needed retouching, spotting, this is before digital wave, and he would take his felt tip pen out, and he would draw little bird wings on the spot and then toss it back to you. Permanent marker. And there was this one time, though, that he took a print and he said something like, we had reshoots, right? And he would say, this is a reshoot, and he tossed it across the room. And it got enough updraft, and one of the Armstrong ceiling tiles was out, and it went right up into the ceiling. Never to be seen again. And I was telling the same story to one of my classes, just to reveal to them how compassionate I was compared to my former instructors. Okay? And walking by my classroom down the hall when I was telling that story was Ron Landers, who was also an East Texas State grad. And he stuck his head in the door when I was telling that story, and he says, "That was my print." He was actually there. This is several years later. So anyway, that's my great Nolan Bailey story back from the olden days. It was pretty rough. I remember he was tougher than Arnold Newman in a print discussion. He had people crying and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so what I thought I would do, since most of you maybe not be familiar with the Weeping Mary work and some of the other documentary projects I've worked on and some of the magazine stuff I've worked on, I thought I'd just kind of run through that, and rather quickly, since we have a time limit with our pizza coming and all. But if I'm not done, I'm just going to keep going a little bit while you do the pizza thing so that you can catch the end of this, because I'm going to show you some really new stuff on this barbecue book that they were talking about. Okay? So I'll just start here, and the O is just actually my first name. So there's really no mystery about it. And so I start with my first name because that's the kind of egomaniacal guy I am. Okay? And notice how the O encompasses this face, this round face here, who was my mom, a major influence in my photographic career. She was an English professor, and so this is back when my dad met her, by the way. This is not, I didn't know her when she looked like this, but she was kind of an American Indian kind of lady, and had this jet black hair. And she influenced me in a way that, unlike my dad, who was a photographer, and he, taught me some basic fundamentals when I first started making photographs. And but she taught me how to paint a picture with words to some degree, anyway. And so this was my dad when he was a college photographer at Jacksonville State University in Northeast Alabama. He had polio, so you see his brace down there. So he did all this really basically with one leg. Smoked a pipe, had the old Crown graphic camera, and I can remember when he was on the sidelines photographing with that camera. But look at those cars, just to get a sense. This is way before my time. Really, seriously, it is. Check out those cars in the background. But he smoked a pipe, and he had this one long stem pipe that I do remember as a child. He smoked a pipe for a long time. And people would always ask him, why are you smoking such a long stem pipe? And I'll never forget his first very spontaneous, off-the-cuff remark when he said, "The doctor told me to stay as far away from tobacco as I can." And that was it. And he's still around. He's 89 years old. My mom's gone, but he's still around and living in Northeast Alabama. This is one of my dad's early photographs when he was a student, and when he photographed the famous flying saucers in northeast, spotted in over the foothills of the Appalachian in Northeast Alabama. Doesn't it sound romantic? Really? No questions about that? All right then. This is one of his PR pictures where he incorporated me. That's me on the scales when I was a little kid. And that ran in the newspaper as a PR release for the local university football team there. Actually, it was just a little college back then. And that's my dad below there with his old split 5x7 view camera, studio camera that he made portraits with. The old bulb release, if you ever wondered why it's called bulb. See, that's a bulb in his hand, and that's where it gets its name there. It was pneumatic. It was the air cable release back in those days. That's my dad. And I wish I had those glasses. And this is the kind of head and shoulder portraits that he would do, that classic head and shoulder portrait stuff. And that was my sister, Opal Denitza Lovett. Oh, by the way, I should say my dad's name is Opal Lovett. My mom's name is Opal Lovett. Okay? And they just gave me the initial O. So does that clear that up? Sorry. I don't know, man. And that's my dad, a little bit more recent, and one of my most famous photographs that he made of the sharecroppers back in he made that picture back in 1965, I believe it was. And a more recent picture, and they were going to throw away that camera, and I said, no, we're keeping it. So now it's a piece of furniture in his home there. This was my mom, and with her favorite Robert Frost book. She used to teach a section in Robert Frost. Those are pictures of me and my sister in the background of the bookshelf that my dad made back in the late 1950s, early 60s maybe. It's one of my English teachers in high school. And she actually was the one who said, listen, why don't you make photographs for the newspaper and the yearbook when I was in high school, 9th, 10th grade, something like that. But, not because I was a good photographer, but because they knew my dad had the materials and the camera and and the means to get it done. And so, but that's where it all began with me. And I went back years later and used to visit her in her antebellum home there in North Alabama. And she was one of these wonderful Southern ladies who was this wonderful Democrat. There wasn't a day that went by that she didn't watch Dan Rather. And this is me when I was like in 10th grade with my first little Yashica Matte twin lens camera. So later on, when I was in school, or after school, I started doing a lot of kind of street photography stuff with the 35 millimeter camera. And this is when I lived in Memphis. And I would just go out on the streets and photograph whoever was there. And Memphis, Houston, those kinds of cities. I was intrigued about urban kind of stuff because I grew up in the country. And so I was really fascinated with that sort of work. And I kind of treated the 35 millimeter camera like a 4x5 view camera. If I needed to put it on a tripod, I would, and I would use a handheld spot meter, and I was calculating, I was using the zone system to be real precise with my exposure and development and pre-visualization, all that kind of stuff. This was a prostitute in Houston on Main Street back then. That's before they cleaned up the city, as they say. This is another prostitute in Houston on Main Street. He was quite beautiful, actually. Had a little bit of an Adam's apple, that lady. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Certainly not. This lady I met downtown Memphis, she was looking around on the ground and she was searching. And I said, what are you looking for? I pulled over. And I said, what are you looking for? She says, I dropped an earring. And so I helped her find this earring, and she was like, oh, man, thanks so much. She was so grand. I said, can I make your portrait? She said, sure. And so she piled into my van. We spent the afternoon together making photographs down by the Mississippi River. And she had a change of clothes with her, I might add. A little spontaneous moment there. I'm always looking, those of you, most of you are photography students, right? So if you've got any questions about anything, but I'll talk, I don't mind talking technical stuff if you want, because I'm not above that. I know a lot of people that come and talk might be, but I don't mind talking about technical stuff. But I'm really interested in that really nice, soft, directional light kind of stuff. And I've traveled fairly extensively in China and other parts of Asia, mainly China. And this was 1979 in Hong Kong, before the handover, when it was really still a British Crown colony. I began photographing more with the square format. Kind of grew up with that square format and did a little bit of 35 millimeter work, but I'll always come back to the old square format there. Fascinated by the way things were stacked and people were just literally living on top of one another. And I'll go through these fairly rapidly, but if you want to stop and ask a question, feel free to do so. A lot of these are very spontaneous moments. Some were not. Like I asked this little boy's dad permission to make his portrait here because I was really interested in all the little kiddo graffiti that's on the wall there. And as soon as I did, his father said something to him, and he saluted. He's got little binoculars in his hand, and the bonus was that little girl peeking right into the edge of the frame. That was just a last little moment occurrence. But always interested in the light and the quality of the light and its direction and its play with the surroundings. This is in Thailand. I was visiting. This was the chief of the village in Thailand. A couple hours from Bangkok somewhere. I have no idea where. But he was offering up the pig's face as a hors d'oeuvre, if you will. I love still life too, you know. I'm mainly interested in the human condition when I make photographs, but I'm also intrigued by still life and how that can incorporate and be a part of the body of work, because oftentimes it reflects the human condition, you know, whatever that still life might be. This was a little series I was doing, however, on Polaroid film, positive film with a 4x5 view camera, and I would do this on cold, rainy winters in my studio in Longview, Texas. And then I would take these little sea creatures that had been dried and so forth, and for the purpose of medicinal purposes, really, for teas and soups and that sort of thing. And I would incorporate fabric and make a little 3D collage. I'd make the photograph, and then I would take an archival glue and use fabric on top of the image. And that later became one of Stephen Colbert's book covers. And then there's old Elliot Erwitt. It was back in probably, I was right here at East Texas State University. By the way, that's the real name. When I was really taking a harder look at Elliot Erwitt's work, because Peterson's magazine had come out with a series of books on Elliot Erwitt, Marilyn Mark, Annie Leibovitz, and a number of great photographers, Art Kane, a number of old-time great master photographers, and Elliot Erwitt was one of them. You know, he's 80-something years old and still working, by the way. And this is the first time I ever saw a picture of the Kilgore College Rangerettes. Was because Elliot Erwitt came to the United States for Match magazine out of Paris, which was like the Life magazine, you know, of France. And they were all wonderfully attracted to Texas, unfortunately, because of the JFK assassination in the early 60s. And so they sent him over just to travel around and find picture stories. And somebody, as a matter of fact, you ever heard of Hobby Airport in Houston? Well, it was Ms. Hobby. Somebody sent him to her just to find out more about Texas, and she told him about the Kilgore College Rangerettes. He went up, checked them out, and promised himself he was going to come back, revisit them, and he ended up doing this wonderful documentary film called Beauty Knows No Pain. And if you haven't seen that, you ought to check it out. You can get it through fairly inexpensively through Amazon, by the way. It's on DVD now, just released a few years ago on DVD. It's a wonderful, gritty kind of black and white documentary. Anyway, I began photographing the Kilgore College Rangerettes and in the early, actually the late 80s, 1989 to be exact. And this was one of the first photographs I had published in Texas Monthly in 1990. And then later, on the State of the Art page, in the center there, in the mink coat, between some of her early Rangerettes from the class of the 40s, back in the 40s. This was in January 1st, 1990, the Cotton Bowl Parade. But that's Gussie Nell Davis in the center there, the innovator and creator of the first dance drill team in the world. How about that? And so finally, Texas Monthly, back in 2000-something, early 2000s, 2004 4, I believe it is. Yeah, maybe 6. I don't know. Anyway, can't read it. There were triplets that year, and so we featured them on the cover of that particular issue. And then we, after several exhibitions and whatnot, and the Texas Monthly spread and so forth, Kilgore, the Rangerette book was published by UT Press. They called up and said, "Hey, you want to do a book?" I said, "Oh, okay." And so these are some of the images from that book. Feel free to laugh. I hope you're not sexually aroused. But it could happen, I suppose. I don't know. I mean, I know you live in Commerce, so anything's liable to set you off. Careful there, big fella. I work a lot in diptychs, pictures paired together. So I just kind of traveled with them that year of 89 and 90 and continued the project after that for several years. And UT Press decided they wanted to do a book of this as well. And then meanwhile, I was working on another documentary project. This was published in Texas Monthly in the late 90s, I believe, in December, one of the December issues in the late 90s. And DJ South, then the designer for Texas Monthly, did all this calligraphy and so forth. And his idea was he wanted to write it like my journal and make it look like I wrote this. And he came pretty close because it's very difficult to read. But he said it took him forever to do that. He kept doing it over and over and over again. But anyway, they won a bunch of awards with that and that layout and so forth. And they were published in several other venues. And then this was in a Life magazine spot was featured them. The Way We Live category in the Eisenstadt Awards. It's kind of a runner-up thing. And we did the book. And here's some images from that project. Weeping Mary is a small community. It's not really even a town. It's not an incorporated town. And it's in a little river bottom flat on the Neches River in Cherokee County, deep in East Texas behind the Pine Curtain. And a buddy of mine who was a publisher of some newspapers told me about this place because he asked a forest ranger when he was doing a story down there, what was down the road. He said, Weeping Mary. He said, what's Weeping Mary? He said, it's just some people that live down there. It's a community and there's a church. And so he told me about that, and I was just fascinated by the name, Weeping Mary, so I went down there and to take a look, and I met these wonderful people and just kind of isolated in this little river bottom flat, and I slowly began to make photographs. And I still visit from time to time, and we've become good friends, some of us anyway, and others are still a little suspicious about my having a book and making my million on photographing Weeping Mary. Because I've made $1 million doing this. Not.
That's why you're still teaching that stuff.
Yeah, right. And anyway, it's been great fun and great joy for me, and led me to some other things from time to time. People will, or sometimes I get a call from a magazine, and they'll give me an assignment, and I say, well, what do you want today? They'll say, well, we want black and white film. We want you to photograph it like you photographed Weeping Mary. And I'm thinking, okay, I spent 10 years in Weeping Mary. You want me to spend a day here? Okay. That'll work. So it's amazing what magazines expect you to do in a day, right? But again, looking at this light, look at that beautiful light. I mean, and this was a kind of a spontaneous thing. I was actually photographing a still life in the front porch, and they had gathered on the front porch just like this, watching me. And all I did was notice that out of the corner of my eye. I pivoted my camera around and say, okay, you guys be real still. And that's the way they were, because I probably could not have done that on my own. I wouldn't have, not that good. Just happened. So also during this time, I'm photographing good old redneck stuff in East Texas and really in the South. Like this was made in Mississippi. Santa Claus stuff. Love those iconic kind of images that we always see around Christmas. Look at it. We've got Rangerettes, we've got Santa Claus. I do Elvis too, by the way. But I love the Santa Claus stuff every year. I go out every year and make at least one photograph, if not more now, but at least one photograph, and I send them out as cards to a few venues and clients and that sort of thing, just for fun. And they're usually these little funky things, plastic yard art stuff that I find. And then, lo and behold, Texas Monthly decides they want to do a series of the Santa Clauses. The one on the left there, that's called Santa Claus Meets the Baby Jesus in East Texas. I'll never forget the first time that was exhibited in Austin in a show one time. I brought this friend of mine along, and she brought her redneck brother along. And I knew he was a redneck because he was in a limo, and he had nothing but Miller Beer iced down in there. So I knew, he's one of us. So anyway, he looks at that photograph in the exhibit, and he looks at it and looks at it. And I say, hey, man, Kerry, what do you think about that? He says, I just want to know one thing. And I said, what's that? He says, is that a double wide? That's all he cared about was that trailer back there. And then Texas Highways did a little ditty on that one year as well later on. A little series of images. So there was this guy that walked into this bar in Kilgore, Texas, and along with two other associates, mainly his uncle, who was a crazy man, He had cut his sister from here all the way down to here. I mean, he's a crazy man. And he talked his little nephew into going into this bar and robbing these crackers. Some of you may not know what a cracker is, but look around this room and the majority of the people in here might be crackers. I'm just saying might be. This is an art department. Probably not. Do you know what I'm talking about? And so they did that, and this is the guy in the picture here. I thought it ironic that he was in stripes and he's in prison now, life sentence for having murdered a redneck that called him the N-word when he was robbing him. And it was a sad case. He shouldn't be in prison. He was talked into it by this crazy uncle, and he was a young kid, and it shouldn't have ever happen. Anyway, that's a different story. My feelings don't really matter in this. But when I get a story like this, sometimes I get the story in advance, and they tell me, okay, we want you to photograph his mother, who is on the right. I mean, his grandmother, who's on the right. His mother's on the left, actually. And they're holding his picture. And they said he grew up in his grandmother's house. And interestingly enough, they have a horseshoe outside the front that's turned up for good luck and all that kind of stuff. And I love bare bulbs in my photographs. So I thought, well, okay, this is the spot. And there was a little American flag down at the end of the porch, and I moved it to that spot. And made their portrait in bright sunlight that day for a story for Texas Monthly about this horrible incident. There was a lawsuit from hell. I'm always curious, and I never did find out if they came up with that title after I made this photograph as if it's looking up the bowels of hell at these attorneys because they've got all these lawsuits that were going on, and they never went to trial or anything, and they've made millions. This is in Dangerfield, Texas, I believe. Close to Lone Star, Texas. So you know exactly where it is now. And it's the biggest facility in the town, except for the First Baptist Church, of course. But this is the way I decided to orchestrate this. As it so happens, one of these attorneys upstairs there, the guy with the beard, I don't have a pointer, do I? The guy with the beard there, his wife was in my photography class at Kilgore College, and I heard about it later, how much they hated that photograph. So that's the most awful photograph. And I heard about it from Bert over at Photographs Do Not Bend.
Oh.
Yeah, I heard about it from them.
Oh, Bert.
So it's in the grapevine. She's talking about how bad of a photographer I am for making this photograph. And I laughed all the way to the bank. But anyway. And these are some other photographs that went with that story. These are the attorneys that were on the other side of the story and so forth in Dallas. And, I'm marrying the electronic flash with the daylight outside the window, which is, you're still learning how to do that here at good old Texas A&M Commerce, I suppose. And then the photograph on the right, just because it's there, I'll mention that. That's an electronic flash also being held by my assistant off to the left to illuminate the mask of his face, and then slightly underexposing the factory in the background. He supposedly was contaminated by a cancerous cloud in this factory in the background, but never actually had to go to the hospital or anything, and he was in good health, but he collected like $25,000 and he was retired. So, it was interesting kind of stuff that was going on with this particular lawsuit. But environmental stuff, And these are the case files that grew. I had to go to Dallas to do the one on the right. And that's a jail cell in that county on the left there. They had to put files in and take up a jail cell because they ran out of room in the courthouse. So I photographed the clerks like that. Okay, so have you seen the movie Bernie? If you haven't seen it, you got to get a load of that movie, man. It's the most hilarious East Texas movie. Have you seen it yet? You got to see it. This guy in the picture on the left there with Ms. What's her name? I can't remember all that stuff. Anyway, Bernie's on the left. Anyway, he became great friends with this little old lady here, and they traveled everywhere. He was in charge of all her money, and she was multimillionaire from Mobil Oil, dead husband, all that kind of stuff. And they would travel to these exotic places, and I couldn't photograph Bernie because he was in jail because he shot her in the back with the armadillo rifle in her own garage. You got to see the movie. Jack Black plays Bernie. You got to see it. Yeah. Anyway, they went to Caesar's Palace. Anyway, I couldn't photograph him, so I got the deputy sheriff to hold the evidence, a piece of evidence. And I love the little heart earring up there and her badge and the keys on the belt. Anyway, so that's what was happening there. And then this story, this guy's dad was responsible for one of the murders in the Birmingham bombings back in 1963, I think it was. Remember Spike Lee's film? 4 Little Girls or something like that. And you got to see that documentary if you haven't seen that either. But anyway, this guy's father finally got convicted. It was brought back up, and we were doing a story on it because he was hiding out in East Texas with his dad behind him, who they had become estranged. And so I went to his house to make his portrait for this story about that issue. And I'm thinking, okay, he grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. His dad was a redneck. I grew up in Jacksonville, Alabama, 70 miles away during the same time. We're almost the same age, almost exactly the same age. But my dad wasn't a redneck. And his dad was a member of the KKK. My dad was just the opposite, okay, and still is, okay. He's kind of a yellow dog Democrat, And so I'm thinking, how am I going to communicate with this guy when we grew up in the same kind of situation, but we're so opposite one another. So I decided before I got there that I would pick up a 12-pack of beer and some cigarettes. And it worked. We were great friends within 5 minutes. sometimes you got to do what you got to do when you're going to communicate with people and make photographs. There's the original image there. This is his sister who was sexually molested by that grandfather, by that father. Okay? Actually, I think that's his daughter, and she was the granddaughter of the guy responsible for the murders. And I went to the 16th Street Baptist Church where the bombing occurred in Birmingham, Alabama, and photographed this deacon. What a wonderful face that guy had. And it was one Sunday, and I just hung out until something happened, and I see this guy, and I photograph him, and I guarantee you, this is what you have to do as photographers. If you get the opportunity, if you have the opportunity, go back and give something back. I went back and visited that guy at his house and gave him that print, and he was so pleased. And it was a joy to get to do that. And this is one of the old guys that testified against the other guy, even though he was involved in the KKK back then too. And talk about a spooky place. I had to go to this old rec yard in Alabama somewhere, and it was real spooky. I was by myself, and I had to go look this guy up, and he was in charge of some kind of wrecking yard, for old cars and stuff. So I found this old Jazz Dog food truck for a background. I didn't try to flatter him a whole lot. This is the investigator and the district attorney when they started that trial back up. They were kind of responsible for helping get that going again after the Spike Lee film. A little memorial place down in the basement of the church, and those are the 4 little girls. The little girl on the left, her father is in prison now for embezzlement, and because he became a county commissioner in Birmingham, and so he happens to be in prison now. It's crazy life, isn't it? And he was a photographer, and he made millions photographing, but yet he embezzled as a county commissioner. So the guy he was in prison, who's now freed finally, and I just asked him to have a seat there in this classroom in the prison and write on the board any thought that he would like to, relate to anyone in this photograph. And he was a model prisoner, finally got out of prison. He killed a Texas Ranger, so it's phenomenal that he's out of prison. But he didn't deserve to be there, and I'm glad he's out. He had to move to Florida, can't come back to Texas. Drug deal gone bad. It's one of those deals. Back in the old days, he was at Denton at University of North Texas. He was trying to help somebody out with some pot, and it was an undercover guy, as it turns out. It's crazy. This guy on death row, and Napoleon Beasley, and another sad case of where he killed somebody, and those are his parents. I had to go and photograph his parents, and then the neighborhood that he grew up in East Texas and that sort of thing. And some of his white friends that he hung out with, and his brother, and he was an athlete. And a lot of his friends were white, and he got a lot of flack from the black community because he was light-complected, he didn't talk like them, and he hung out with white athletes a lot, and they were best friends and that sort of thing. So he had to go out and prove himself, and he ended up with the death penalty, unfortunately. It's photographing the space shuttle deal for Texas Monthly, and I don't know if you remember that or not, but it went down in Nacogdoches area, and there were all these reports out: do not touch the stuff, leave it alone, any of the debris and so forth. And so I photographed this guy and his son. They were out looking for stuff, and he gathered this up in this little circuit board. I said, "Sir, I don't think you're really supposed to touch that or pick it up. You're supposed to leave it and just report it." And he says, "Oh, well, how come? It's already broke." That's where we live. That's where we live. And this guy, I get all this race stuff. This guy was having to break up a racial incident that was happening at Robert E. Lee High School. Go figure. And so we were working on the body language and so forth with Robert E. Lee in the background, and the attitude is everything, little sign there, little nuances like that to help kind of relate to the issue at hand. This is like a Hitchcock movie, doesn't it? This was the lady that down at the Hemp Hill. They have a little museum there on the square the old jailhouse, and the noose is still there. And she's the lady that was taking care of the museum at the time. We were doing a little feature story on her. And this guy's retired, and so is his thoroughbred horse, but he was also the great innovator and race car driver, Carroll Shelby. If you ever heard the Shelby Cobra automobile. And I think he just died recently, as a matter of fact. And they were arguing over where to bury him. And I think he made it back to Pittsburgh, Texas, if I'm not mistaken. So again, a little electronic flash over there. Just got an assistant out there in the pasture holding the flash, and then incorporating that with the daylight as well. And the horse. It was an interesting struggle. Some other little issues that we photographed for Texas Monthly. This guy was brutally beaten and left for dead on the side of the road and ended up in a nursing home for the rest of his life. Ended up winning in the court case, and he's a millionaire, and he's taken care of for the rest of his life now. But again, a bunch of rednecks did the wrong thing, right? So I made his portrait several times, and that's his, I think, grandmother and cousin of, sorry, can't remember the town. This goes a little far back, sorry. I'm an old man, I'm confused. But anyway, anytime a photographer can find a policeman with a vest on and a hat and dead animals and John Wayne on the wall, by God, you better go for it, man. And that's a treasure, isn't it? And this is a little Juneteenth thing I did down. These are tear sheets, so they're very poor quality reproductions. Apologize for that. But these are tear sheets from Gourmet Magazine, where we did a little Juneteenth thing of Mama Sugar's Barbecue. A bunch of African American cowboys and cowgirls get together every Juneteenth and celebrate the barbecue and the emancipation. And this is the spread from Gourmet Magazine. Dominoes, pies, Mama Sugar there in the cowgirl hat there. And they wanted it like Weeping Mary. So that's what they got. This is another fun project I did for Gourmet Magazine before they went out of business. I don't know why they went out of business. Because they took me all the way from Texas to Manhattan to photograph Dominican culture and restaurants. It was a joy to do it, you know. I mean, I'd walk out the hotel, the 4 or 5 star hotel door, and there'd be a black car there for me to put my equipment in and just take me around wherever I needed to go that day. And so quite extravagant, but it was fun. It was a blast. And they said, again, just photograph, just do your thing and make photographs of these places. And so this is the spread from that. Variety of portraits, some still lifes. And this is the photograph on the left. Those are like 4 different images, okay? And then the full page on the right there. And then the photograph on the left is different from the one on the right. And it's hard to see because, those graphic design people do bleeds and stuff like that. It's hard to read in this reproduction. But even the little carts out on the street we were photographing. And then this guy on the right, man, the best flan in the world. That's that little piece of pie-looking stuff down the foreground. This was a story about Scott Peacock. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a famous chef, and this lady who he became great friends, and she was his mentor in writing his books and also in his cooking. And he would show up on the morning show and stuff like that, doing that little cook thing that they do in the mornings. But he had this wonderful restaurant in Atlanta for a while. I can't find him now. I don't know where he is. He's off doing a film or something, somewhere. But anyway, I was documenting him, photographing him about a little piece for Gourmet Magazine. And he had these horses and that he would take care of, and that's Scott. And he was from Alabama, and he is gay, and he could never return home. His father never really accepted that, and yada, yada, yada. So the story is pretty interesting. Now, the lady that he was holding her picture, she was a famous, I wish I could remember everybody's names, but I just can't do it. But she was a well-known chef. She used to hang out with a lot of people out in New York and Truman Capote and those kinds of folks. So pretty neat little crowd. This was an outtake. They decided that this photograph was a little bit too soft, they said. They used the word soft. All right. These are the last slaves of Mississippi. They were discovered in the 1960s. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Just north of where Britney Spears grew up in Louisiana. So that gives you an idea. But they were out, and this is the place where I could only get 3 of them to return to this place. The others wouldn't go back. And we had to take several cars and hide behind a barn to photograph them on this land where they had been enslaved all their lives until the 1960s. And you see how they're kind of old now. They just finally came out because I guess that family that enslaved them are finally gone enough to where they wouldn't be harmed. And this was the father. He was like 114 years old. This is him in a hospital bed in his daughter's house. Okay. This guy was 70 years old. He went back to first grade. This was for People magazine. He went back to first grade to learn how to read and write. And so I went up to St. Joe, Missouri to photograph him in his first grade classroom for a couple of days and documented him. And then they ran this as well in another story. And then I'll show you the entire photo essay right here. This is Alfred. He literally walked 5 miles in the snow to school. Didn't have a car. Really did it. It's him in the first grade classroom. He had a little stool that he'd sit on. It's pretty neat. Practicing writing with the little first graders. These are not staged. This is spontaneous stuff. So what I did, I went in there, had a whole day. I went in and I bounced flash so it kind of looked like classroom lighting, okay? But I'd be able to handhold and move my film camera around, my little box camera that I used. And these are little spontaneous moments. It looks like I might have contrived this, but I didn't. And he became a mentor to some of these kids. So I love magazine work because you get to travel and meet all kinds of folks. He would show up early in the morning before everybody would get there, and he'd put the coffee on for him and the teacher. For himself and the teacher, excuse me. And so there was this wonderful light coming through this, theft-proof grid outside the window and creating that pattern on his face, and then echoing that shadow, echoing him reading the book and that shadow behind him. This is him where he would practice reading where he lived at night in a basement. Bare bulb. So I wanted to make it look like that bare bulb was illuminating this. Okay, so just bouncing a flash and creating that one light look. Okay, so let me go very quickly, and Becca, you'll have to find it. What, do we close this up here? Dell Computers. What's that all about?
Whatever else you need.
How much time we got? How are we looking on time?
It's 20 after.
It's 20 after? Okay. Well, let me just... Any questions right now? Yes.
I've got a couple if you don't mind.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Oh, the Weeping Mary and the Birmingham photos. What were you shooting with?
Hasselblad.
Possible? Second question. When you're doing a book, probably for yourself personally, what legalities do you have to worry about as far as model releases, that kind of stuff?
I don't worry about it at all.
You don't worry?
No. Nope. I have everybody's permission. I'm not doing any photographs that would defame anyone. I'm not using the photographs to advertise a product or a idea or anything like that. I couldn't take one of those photographs and advertise Coca-Cola without their permission. And if it defamed anyone, then I might be in trouble. But, I get their parents' permission, and I go from there. And so as long as I stay within those boundaries, I'm pretty safe, obviously.
But as far as producing a book for yourself, possibly to sell, it's still all right without written model releases?
Yes, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, yeah. Yeah. Now, it's always best to get model releases. So let me end by saying that. If I work for People magazine, I have to get a model release of every kid, every child, okay? This guy, model release. He was autistic, and I did this story for People magazine about the Horse Boy. Another film you might want to check out. It's called The Horse Boy. That photograph at the bottom part of that, it's some photo montage there, of course, because there are parts of Asia in the background and so forth, Mongolia. But it's an interesting story. I won't go into detail about it, but the foreground of the horse I did in his backyard. It's about a boy whose father found out that with him around animals and wildlife, he became calmer and easier, more apt to cope with his autism, extreme autism. They also went and talked to shamans in Mongolia and so forth, and sought religious or spiritual guidance. And so it's an interesting film. You might check that out. But that's how a story can sometimes snowball. This ended up being the movie poster, when it was just the lead picture to the People magazine story. And they wanted me to also do it in black and white like I do Weeping Mary. I got there, and, I don't know if you work with autistic people before, but they're like gnats. Their attention span is like boom, 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 And by the time I focused my image, it was something else going on. And so I called them up right away when I was on the spot at the location, starting to make photographs. I spent about 3 days with them. And I said, look, man, I'm going to do this digitally. If you want it in black and white, I'll make it in black and white for you, but I'm going to do this digitally so I could work with my autofocus. And they ended up loving the color work, so we went that way with it. But it was one of those things where sometimes you just got to have, the situation dictates everything. Number one thing I ever learned from Muriel and Mark, okay? Situation dictates everything, right? Real quick little photo essay here. This won't take but a second. Well, I don't know. It's a Dell. Dell computers. First time I've ever operated one of these. My dad would call this a gizmo. I got him a little Apple computer,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Your work has this really impeccable, sense of composition and design. Where did that come from? Did you learn that, or is that something that's just ingrained in you?
I think you learn just about everything, and there's so many influences. So it's hard to trace that back, definitely, but because it becomes very intuitive. I mean, you don't think about those things after a while when you make a lot of photographs. It's just kind of an intuitive kind of reaction that you have with the subject and environment and situation. So, where's the slideshow start, Guy?
Click on the slideshow.
Where?
On the very top.
Top middle.
Keep going.
Thank you.
There you go.
And then far left.
What?
Current slide.
There.
Yeah.
Right here?
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. This was about a story where the daughter wasn't allowed to go out with this particular guy anymore. And so the boyfriend here, she talks him into burning the house and killing the whole family. Her two little brothers and the mother, and the father crawls out, shot and burned to the neighbors, and he escapes. And this is the boyfriend who's in prison. He'll be there for a while. Okay? So these are some, I don't remember which one they actually used in Texas Monthly. And what was funny is I did this story first for People magazine, and then Texas Monthly calls me up and wants me to do it again, so I had to go back twice and do a whole different take on it, because Texas Monthly has a different take on things, right? And so these are a few of the things. Now, what I do when I'm in death row here is that I take a black piece of foam core board with me with a hole in it, and I shoot through it because this is glass, and to avoid the reflection of the camera and everything in the background sometimes. You see my little softbox reflected in the glass. Okay, so it's a little odd. It looks like it's kind of coming back, but it's really in the front, illuminating the mask of the face there. So there we go. How do you get rid of that piece of crap?
Just use the mouse to click.
Thank you. This is the father that escaped, and this is his new family, 2 sons and a wife, a year later. Wow is right. And he's preaching this in churches all over the country now. He's been on all kinds of TV shows with it and stuff like that too. His neighbor carved that little plank to put over his entry to his driveway, and he made it into a bench at the foot of his new wife's bed. These are the neighbors he literally crawled from his house to their house to get help after this had happened at night. Yeah, so man, what? Roy Rogers and Dale Evans still around. Y'all don't know who that is, do you? All right. In the arms of Jesus, Penny, Bubba, and Tyler. He carved that for them. He was like a grandfather to the kids. And there are the kids. And that's the neighbor holding that little picture, because he was the only one that had that picture. He wasn't going to give it up. I had to go to him to get that picture. And so I incorporated his nice, rugged hands as part of the composition. And this was found in the burned rubbish. And this is the father holding this picture of the daughter who was in prison. And it says, "How long do I have to hold the smile?" It's a little tourist card. And this is all that's left. There's charred trees. The house was gone. And that's the road they lived on out in the country in East Texas. This is the grave site. His wife in the center and the 2 sons on adjacent. 2 different takes on that. I think they used the one of him squatting. Long shot. This is the road that kind of illustrates where he had to crawl from his house all the way to the neighbor's house, because they lived out in the country. So it was a good little piece away. Okay. And I'll just show you very quickly the barbecue book. You know, I'm tempted just to show you the book. I don't know if I should or not, because it hadn't been released yet. How do I get out of this? That makes sense. I'll do this because I think you'll probably see more images this way. So this barbecue book is something that was started with kind of like Gourmet Magazine, because Rob Walsh is the writer, and I was working with this writer, and so we began working together on a couple of projects for Gourmet Magazine, and we decided that, hey, let's just do a book together. And so we were going to do this thing. It was going to be a photographic book and just a narrative, and it turned into a cookbook with recipes. And we traveled from East Texas to Arkansas, Tennessee, North Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas, and back. And what did I do here? You're just still waiting?
Yeah.
And so that's where, and so we're still in production. All I got to do is finish tweaking the photographs for reproduction quality and that sort of thing. It's pretty much laid out and designed. Don't worry, this isn't it. I'm going to kind of scroll down. Whoops. Here we go. Oh, I tell you what, I really should show you this one little piece here. I want you to check out this quote by Elliot Erwitt. He wrote the foreword to this Rangerette book, by the way. But I love his quotes and makes so much sense. And is that Brittany? Hello. Okay, so let me just. Can y'all see? That's big enough for y'all to see, right? I'll just show you a few of these images of the barbecue stuff, and it's just a series of stuff. I go in, I take some lights in when some of those pits and everything is really dark, and so I was working with a combination of electronic flash and some time exposures and that sort of thing. This is in Bryan, Texas, at Martin's. I think it's called Martin's Barbecue. And doing a few still lifes as well. Not all of these images that you'll see will be in the book. This will. But just looking at barbecue. That's an old worn table. What wore the table out so much was playing dominoes. That's a domino table. And so it's all color, and I was doing all this digitally as opposed to the black and white stuff. This is the silhouette of the writer, Rob. So a bunch of books out, food books out. And I know this one's going to be in the book, I'm pretty sure. This was a place like 2:30 in the morning in Houston outside a bar. So I was going out, setting up lights, almost creamed a Cadillac in the parking lot with my light. I caught it, man, just before it hit the hood of the car. The damn writer was supposed to be watching that for me. Don't ever trust a writer. That's at the Brown Pig in Marshall, Texas. So we have a few food shots, to say the least. Actually, this ended up being a vertical, I think. This is a crazy little place down in Taylor, Texas, the Taylor Cafe. Vincel down there in the right-hand corner started this little cafe right after he got out of the Navy. And he's like 89 now and still there. He's still there in that chair right there now. What time is it? Yeah, he's still there. And you got Clint Eastwood, and you got the pinup, and then you got these little daily press articles about Vincel, and then dead animals. I mean, what more could you want? You got it all right there, and they serve beer there. This ran in what's that other magazine that took? It's French, Saveur magazine. Yeah, Saveur magazine. It took over where Gourmet magazine left out. And that's when we started this book things, when we did that story together with Saveur magazine. That's back in Vincel's pit. This is Vincel. He has to have a walker to be back there at the pit, man. Can't do that on his own anymore. That's pretty cool, though. This is down in Lockhart, Texas at Smitty's Meat Market. They used to hang knives for you to carve your meat at Smitty's. And those are the old table. Of course, you can't do that for health reasons anymore. It used to be healthy, but now it's not. So you see all that worn table where the knives would hang from a chain. Little still lifes, incorporate some still lifes there. They got a hell of a wood pile, man. That guy that runs that place is a little anal retentive. A little on the anal retentive side. Anyway. So that kind of variety is what you're looking for if you're doing photo essays, picture stories, that sort of thing. A variety, horizontal, vertical, long shots, close-ups, and it's all about the light, isn't it? This is up in Arkansas, Greg's Barbecue.
How did y'all find all of these restaurants?
Rob knows everything. That's it. I drove, he rode, he knew. It was, balanced. It was balanced. And thank God we got separate hotel rooms on the road trip. Because he's a little gassy. The window had to be cracked several times on the road. Anyway.
So how many shots would you do, like for that book, how many photographs did you make?
And that was X number of photographs.
489.
Just how many are in the book?
No. 143. So I love this place, man. This was the pie shop. That's Mary, bear bulb. It's almost like that light bulb is illuminating her own entire world. But I love that little shop. And that was right across from Craig's Barbecue, and she did the barbecue sauce for him, and it tasted like one of her pies. This is a little further down the road at another little barbecue. That's a rib sandwich. Now, this is Southern barbecue. This isn't Texas barbecue. So you get this coleslaw and stuff on it, okay? It's really quite different. This is the spiritual house of barbecue. That's Ms. Payne at Payne's Barbecue in Memphis. Man, you go to Memphis, you got to go to Payne's, okay? To answer your question, around here, no. Memphis, Payne's Barbecue. Fantastic. But our job was not to really judge what was the best barbecue with this book. It's just to discuss the culture. And Rob kind of got enjoyment in talking about, the next day and our hangover after Bill Street, things like that. I don't appreciate that, but I have to live with it. My dad's certainly not going to appreciate that being publicized. And I'm going to swear he was just doing it for the, poetry. It was poetry. It was poetry. Black Elvis in Memphis. Because we're doing different chapters. Religion and barbecue, beer and barbecue, the blues and barbecue. So a variety of chapters and stuff. And so these kind of correlate to that sort of thing. This is up in Tennessee. It's Scott's Barbecue. This is another little place in Tennessee. Love that guy. This, unfortunately, this isn't going to make the book, but I love that. It's one of my favorite pictures. I don't know why. So what's cool about this picture, let me go back one. I have to tell you this because see the hickory there piled up? And then they build a fire and to get the coals, and they shovel the coals in for this kind of indirect heat that they do there. Those sticks are from a drumstick manufacturer close by in Tennessee. And they get the discards and they use them for barbecue. So that's really pretty cool recycling there, I suppose. It's all about the environment. And yeah, everybody does the little American Gothic thing. Sorry, I apologize for that. But, publishers loved it. Those idiots. Anyway, this guy is in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. You ever heard of Muscle Shoals? Used to be a fantastic recording studio there. It probably still is. Leonard Skinner, Rolling Stones, all kinds of people recorded there. It's up in the northwest corner in Alabama. Anyway, this was this guy's barbecue joint, and this illumination came from his porch light back there where the pit is. And at 3200 ISO, several shots, I finally got a sharp one. Big Bob Gibson's barbecue pit. They specialize in this white sauce for their chicken, barbecue chicken. This is in North Alabama at Top Hat Barbecue. They do these peach pie, fried peach pies. This is Green Top in barbecue in North Alabama. And those are his parents that started that place. Uncle Fester is what I call this one.
What did you weigh before you did this job?
What's that?
What did you weigh before you did this job, and what did you weigh after?
I've lost weight since I've stopped doing this, but I did gain about 12 pounds the year I was doing that. But I'm starting to lose it finally again. But this is at Archibald's Barbecue outside of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and this is Archibald. And then that's what I suggested for the back cover of the book. See the impression of the sandwich there. But just a few takes from that. Any questions about that stuff? I prefer, just so you'll know, photographers, I prefer to use the light that's there rather than incorporate light when I can. However, I would take in electronic flash from time to time and do that. I think that's the last slide, isn't it? Oh, it's not. I'm sorry. Yeah, see, like over here at the Brown Pig in Marshall, Texas, I had an electronic flash back there, backlighting him, and then another bounce light illuminating the guy in the foreground to get that effect. But then this photograph was all window light and fluorescent light combined, actually, and a time exposure with a tripod. And there's a fan blowing, so you get a little bit of blur of the paper that the sandwich is sitting on. Love that wallpaper in that place. This is back at Payne's Barbecue, so you get that mustard coleslaw, man. It's really good. I'm a vegetarian, so I can't tell you much about this. This is on the hood of my car, my Honda Element. What is that? Sweet potato pie in a paper bag. So we just put it out there and using the overcast sky for illumination. And these were the skies when I went back last summer to East Texas during the wildfires on I-20 headed west outside of Shreveport. This is back at the pie shop, man. That lady with the pies. That was all mine. And actually, I went across the street to the barbecue place and gave the rest of it away. This was a tailgate party in Auburn, Alabama. When Auburn and Alabama play, it's a great tailgate party. And so they're barbarians, aren't they? And so they're sitting there with a whole hog out there. And then this guy made a casket, a barbecue pit out of a casket. And I found out that it was a cooler on one side. It was very well insulated. A cooler on one side, the pit on the other. And you see the guy, if you know anything about Alabama, Emily, you see the guy in the background is wearing the Bear Bryant hat with the crimson jersey. Anyway, they were, this guy paints it. Those are Auburn colors, the orange. But he paints it different colors when he goes to NASCAR. Okay? So we're talking about people like us. Okay? And this guy had the front end of a Chevelle Malibu made into a barbecue pit. But check out all the cool activity going on. The chicks dancing, the guy with the dog in the background, guy with the cell phone in the back, and then the big screen TV set up. Auburn and Alabama both represented in that photograph. So that was a fun day. That was last Thanksgiving, folks. And this is in Huntsville, Texas. Barbecue and religion. We're doing a whole chapter on barbecue and religion. This guy preaches and barbecues for Christ. And I walked in, nothing happened. He was just like that. Set up my tripod, made his picture. He was studying his Bible for the Sunday service the next day. And what was so cool about it is I got to talk to him afterwards and became friends. This is him holding a plate of their barbecue. Probably the best barbecue picture in the whole book. But anyway, he ended up, he used to be a state trooper in Alabama, and he went to school where my dad used to office at the university in my hometown. So, small world. This is a guy in Richmond, Texas, who also barbecues for Christ. We did a whole section on community barbecues also. This is rabbit and different stuff. That's Bubba. I thought I was in Deliverance, man. I'm telling you. If I dropped something, I wasn't going to bend over and get it. I'll tell you that right now. These are the ladies at the community barbecue. Little girls with their cakes for the auction. Back on Memphis, the Blues. This guy was cool. This is North Alabama and Gaston, Alabama at Liz's Barbecue. 3 generations they run this barbecue place. Her mother before her, and the lady in the foreground, her mother before her, and then the daughter in the background, and then the granddaughter. And it's just in this little Y fork in the road barbecue place. Really good too, from what I've been told. This guy I went to high school with. What happened to him? Drugs, maybe? Maybe. It's like the devil of barbecue. His name's Gary Marbut. He was a couple years older than me, actually, so I'll look like that year after next. Up in the landscape up in the Carolinas was gorgeous. We did this thing on, convenience store, drive up, honk your horn type barbecues, drive-in barbecue places. And this was a car hop guy at night. So I'm sitting out there with my tripod. That's my Honda Element in the foreground with the reflection. My headlights are on. As I hold it right there, man, he says, whoa, what's going on? He said, I just want to make your picture. Okay. And so he hung in there for me. A little time exposure there. There's another time exposure. It's all, headlights and neons and stuff, fluorescents on the inside. Another guy. Another place up in North Carolina, Lexington, North Carolina. Artificial light and daylight. I love that combination sometimes, It just has this nice warm glow about it. So I'm using that window light, but I'm actually illuminating the foreground, the whole hogs in the foreground, the dead carcass in the foreground, with electronic flash. I've got a little grid spot aimed at that, so I'm using the electronic flash, plus I'm dragging the shutter enough to get that low window light coming through. It looks like a lot of bright light in there, but it was a dim day, but try to make it work. This is Grady's barbecue, somewhere in the Carolinas. He did whole hogs also, gruesome stuff. A little cliche, but I love that image. This is Grady and his wife that run that little barbecue joint. So some structured portraits incorporated with documentary, still life, creating a variety and going along with the narrative about me and this guy, Rob, traveling across country together, putting up with each other and finding these little places. This is young blood here, man. This guy's really famous, the one on the left. His father started the place. He's taken it over, but he belongs to all this National Food Federation stuff, and he's quite famous. And they come in and people order barbecue and they fly it to New York and stuff from this guy's place in North Carolina. So they have this barrel where they have this perpetual fire going on with the wood. You guys go ahead and start doing your pizza. I'm almost done with this. I'm salting the pit. This is the most bizarre. This is North Alabama. This is almost in my backyard here where I grew up. Thelma's Barbecue down in Houston. Man, the best catfish. I'm telling you, the best catfish in the world. Yes, sir.
Yes, I've been to their barbecue before, all down Texas A&M. Their barbecue is delicious.
It is, but you ought to try the catfish. And I've eaten catfish all over the place, man. That's really good catfish. I'll eat a fish every once in a while. This is Baby J. He makes $64,000 a week. Heroin. No, kidding. Kidding. This is at the Houston Livestock Rodeo barbecue cook-off stuff. There's some bizarre stuff that goes on there, man. Man, you talk about gruesome dead animals. Man, it's just crazy. It's like Mardi Gras at that place. This is Houston. And then barbecue and beer joints. Let me show you this. Let me see if I've got it in here. Barbecue beer joints. We're doing a thing on that. What is that? That's the end. Oh, it's too bad I don't have the final picture of this one. Or is it? No, it's not. It's not the one we're using, but it's close. So you got this Confederated Foods back there. They had to change their logo a little bit because it wasn't so politically correct. And then we found at this place these guys shining shoes in front of it. And we thought, wow. You know? Yeah, interesting. Interesting. So Rob's doing a little piece about that. Any other questions, folks, or comments? Yes.
What do you shoot with primarily?
Either the 2¼ film camera or one of those little digital cameras. It's a Canon. I think there's a 5. There's a 5 and a D or something like that. Some of these were made with a little Canon T1i, but most of them were done with the 5D, the old 5D, not the newest one, because it's not even a 5D anymore, is it? It's called something else. It is still. You know, you heard about the 6D? It's cheaper. It's the same but cheaper. Almost. Couldn't be quite. Anyway. But really, it doesn't matter. You know, like I've got a show up right now at Kilgore College at the faculty exhibit where I have little point-and-shoot Polaroids in the show, so I don't care. You know, it's not really about the equipment so much as it is the other stuff, I think. The light and your interpretation. And well, you've heard all that before in school, right? And but I really enjoy the digital work, but I still love film too, you know. And
You still making all your prints? You still making all the prints?
yes, yes. A lot of some of the film work that I do now, I will scan the negatives and make inkjet prints because I finally found some paper that I really love, that I really enjoy that. Ilford used to make it. It's called Harmon by Hannah Mule. If you want to check that out, it's a beautiful paper. Smooth surface. You put it next to an air-dried, glossy fiber-based print, and it's very close, very nice. Like it a lot. Okay, anything else? Yes.
How did you establish your relationship with the people from the Weeping Mary?
That's a good question because I went down and there was this one guy. It's not really a store. It's not really a shop, but I could tell he had a little fix-it thing going on, you know, with cars and bicycles, neighborhood bicycles and stuff. And so he was kind of there under his awning and stuff. And I just got out of my car without a camera or anything and introduced myself. I said, hey, I was always wondering what was going on, you know, what was down here and so forth. It's really a nice community, and I got to talking with him. Then I went back, and I left it like that. And I went back a couple of more times and visited him.
Did you bring them like gifts or anything?
No, I just went back and visited him. And about my third visit, I said, man, I make photographs. Man, I'd love to be able to make some portraits down here and do a little series of pictures of the community. Do you think people would be all right with that? He said, yeah, some of them probably would, you know. I'll introduce you to a couple of people. And that's kind of how it started. Then I would meet people without my camera and hang out a little bit without a camera. Then I started bringing a camera out, but I began making like little details and still lifes of the fence or the clothesline or the, you know, a detail of a house here and there. Then kids would run and get in front of the camera, and I'd say, well, we got to ask your parents. And the parents would say, yeah, you can take the picture and stuff like that. And so I accumulated a series of photographs, and my friend, the publisher that was with the newspaper in Nacogdoches, asked me if I would mind doing a series of photographs, and we'll just call it The Children of Weeping Mary. And I said, that'd be great, and that'll give me a purpose for being there, you know. And so I began to tell the people, I'm going to do a series of pictures for the newspaper, The Children of Weeping Mary. And most of them were very agreeable to that, no problem. And so they got a writer that did a little story on it, and we published a 4-page or 2-page spread of pictures, you know. And then later we did Christmas at Weeping Mary and did a series of Christmas pictures because they go all out and with the decorations and that sort of thing. And then I kept photographing after that and accumulated a body of work, and it went from there. Some of the people were a little upset over a couple of the pictures that were published and on the internet. The little boys in their underwear swimming and that sort of thing. So I had them taken off the After Image website. I don't have a website. I don't really deal with that. But After Image did, and a couple other venues maybe do. I'm not sure because I don't keep up with that. But anyway, I was sure that was taken off because they weren't happy with that. I said, that's fine. And Then a couple of people thought, like I said, I was making all this money on this book. But most of the main people were perfectly happy with the book. Okay, so when the book came out, I said, okay, UT Press, let's do this. I'm going to go down there on a Sunday at the Church of Weeping Mary, and I'm going to join their service, and I want to give whoever wants a book. I said, okay. So they supplied several cases of books, and I gave them to the people. So every house in that neighborhood has a book, if not more than one. And I gave one to the church to keep. So you try to give back. And plus I gave pictures out as I went along, you know. So I think everybody's happy. And if you get that book and you check it out someplace, read what Ann Tucker has to say in her essay from the Museum of Fine Art in Houston, because she does a great job of writing a little forward for that book, and she speaks about how we sometimes can take advantage of a community, and she has a good quote in there, and I'll just leave it there for you to read. Okay, so you can look that up. It's pretty cool. Yes.
Did you ever find out where the name Weeping Mary originated?
Well, there's the folklore has it that some biblical people think that it comes from Our Lady of Sorrows and that sort of thing. But folklore has it that I found this out from the people after sitting for hours on front porches and listening to the folklore, that way back some time ago, it was this is a freedom colony. So African Americans were given land after they were freed as slaves. And this lady owned this land, and this white guy wanted to buy it from her. Well, she didn't want to sell it to a white man. And you can understand that. You know, even now, people aren't treated the way they should be treated in some parts of our country, right? But particularly back then, she did not want to sell it to this white landowner. And so the white landowner decided to get this African-American guy to go down there and buy it for him without telling her who it was for. And she did. And when she finally found out that she had been tricked like this, she wept and wept and wept. And the community became known as Weeping Mary after her. And they named the Church of Weeping Mary. So that's the folklore behind it, which is kind of more interesting than any other story I've heard. I haven't heard many, really, other than the fact that church folk thinks it comes from the biblical Our Lady of Sorrows, that sort of thing. You know, the Virgin Mary, that stuff. Okay? Anything else, folks? Well, I really appreciate you guys inviting me to do this. It's been fun for me to kind of review this stuff after a while. I haven't looked at it in a while. It's kind of nice to look back on yesteryear.
Thank you so much, Rufus. That was great.
Yeah, well, you're quite welcome, man.
Rufus, you know there's an app now. Texas Monthly has an app that will show you the best barbecue wherever you are.
Yeah, so just refer to that. Leave me out of it.
Right. So you don't need your...
Yeah. And it's not about the best barbecue. You're going to enjoy what Rob wrote in that book if you take a look at it.
Sounds like a great idea.
It was fun. It was fun. And we're kind of contemplating another book called Community Barbecues, because they're all over the place. And that'll be a fun project if we get involved in that. I don't know if we will or not, but ready to take a breather. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Hey, well, I don't have barbecue, but I do have pizza back here, so...
Is it barbecue pizza?